everyone, I am 𝓥𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪 and welcome to General Classes Funda Clear. So today I will explain the fourth chapter of the Class 10th Geography, and the chapter that we have here is Agriculture. So agriculture, now this chapter we did talk about it in Class 8th Geography as well. Now till now you might have already noticed that in this geography, in Class 10th Geography, what we have been discussing and will discuss is all about is related to human geography, like about human interactions, human relations, and about human geography you could say. So is this chapter, agriculture, is it really related to human geography? Well, it is. You know what, that for agriculture you need labor of man, like for sowing the seeds and harvesting the crop. For that you need human beings, you need us, you need labor, and that is why we are going to discuss about agriculture in this chapter. Now agriculture is also, you know, that is very important for any of the countries, and in our country 2/3 of all the population of our country is engaged on the agriculture. Their occupation or means of livelihood, meager income comes from agriculture, and thus we can say that a lot of living is made from agriculture in our country. Now there can be different types of farming, different types of cultivation methods that we are going to discuss in this chapter. So in this chapter we will discuss about the impacts of globalization on agriculture, about agricultural reforms, about different crops, the major crops, the non-food crops, and different types of things related to agriculture in this chapter. As all of you know that agriculture, that is all the food grains, most of the food grains and food that we consume comes from agriculture. But not only that, it also provides the raw materials for many of the industries, and those we can say that it is very important for our survival as well, as it is a cultivation method. So let's discuss about agriculture in broad view in this chapter with the first topic, that is types of farming. So types of farming, as also know that there can be different cultivation methods and different types of farming in our country. Not just in our country, there can be different cultivation methods all over the world. But as we are discussing about agriculture in our country, those will always only look at the types of methods farming that is done by the people in our country. So you could say that we are going to discuss about the types of farming. As also know that different types of crops are grown in different types of farming, and there can be just one single crop that will be in this category, and in another state it will be in another category. So it can depend upon the region as well. And you know what, that through agriculture many of the spices, many of the plantation crops are exported as well. So it does have an importance as well. So now let's discuss about the types of farming. Now mainly there can be three types of farming that can be seen in our country. Now the first one that is here is primitive subsistence farming. So primitive subsistence farming, now still it can be seen in remote areas of our country. Not so much you can see it in our country, but yeah, in some remote areas, in very backward areas, in rural areas, and still in some parts there is primitive subsistence farming continued by the farmers. Now primitive subsistence farming is a type of farming where only the primitive tools are used, like hoe and hoe, digging sticks, and none of any chemical fertilizers like insecticides, pesticides, or any other type of chemicals, biochemicals, or modern tools inputs are used in this type of farming. And in this type of farming, community labor or the family labor are used. So you could say that a very old way of farming, like a traditional method, cultivation method that is being continued in our country, is still in some remote areas. So you could say that primitive subsistence farming would not be for a very market purpose. Well, it could be in some cases, but mainly it is for the that family needs or for the community needs. So you could say that primitive subsistence farming, where primitive tools are used and no kind of modern input is used, like no chemical fertilizers, and you won't use any kind of that chemicals and there are tractors, many machines for irrigation, after that labor as well. So you could say that is primitive subsistence farming. Now in primitive subsistence farming there comes the slash and burn farming as well. Now slash and burn farming, did I think that you have been studying from many years, since many years you could say. Now slash and burn farming, that is if there is a very big forest and a kind of very big land. Now what would happen that a family or a community or a tribal community, what they would do is that in a patch of land they would do the cultivation by clearing of all the forest and would burn then all the forest, you could say all the trees of that patch of land, and with the ashes of those trees you could say they act as a natural fertilizer, and it products, it kind of make the soil very fertile in that area, and the cultivation, the agriculture is done on that land. When that land loses its productivity, then they would go to another patch of land on the same area in the same forest you could say, and this would continue till all the patches of land of that forest have been cleared off. Now what would happen that after many years in the first patch of land it will be a kind of continuous cycle that would become. Now after many years in the first patch of land there were again the trees that would be grown, and again the same process would be continued. So this is known as a slash and burn activity, slash and burn cultivation method, or slash and burn agriculture you could say. Now this slash and burn agriculture, or you could say method, is known by different names in different regions. Like in northeastern states it is known as a zooming cultivation, and in different countries too. It is not just in India that there are different names of this type of cultivation, but in countries as well, like it is known as milpa cultivation, milpa in Mexico and Central America. After that in Venezuela it is known as popcorn cultivation. So you could say that by different names it is known all over the world, not just in India, but in India too there are different names in different regions. So you could say that is about the primitive subsistence farming. After that we have here second type of farming, that is intensive subsistence farming. So intensive subsistence farming. Now this type of farming where you could say that there is an intensive population pressure on the land, and that is why it is known as the intensive farming, and this intensive subsistence farming. Now you know what, that this kind of agriculture it can be seen in those areas where there is population pressure on the land, and from a limited land you are going to have more and more unlimited a kind of output from that land, like you are using that land to the fullest extent. Now what would happen that like right to inheritance land has alternatively divided lands between you could say between many people, individuals, but now what they are doing is that from limited land they are demanding for so much outputs, and thus a lot of insecticides, pesticides is used in that kind of agriculture. You could say that all type of modern technologies are used in that kind of agriculture. After that in intensive farming what happens that you just suppose that there is a land, and on that land there is kind of so much use of biochemicals and irrigation methods, and after that from just a single patch of land you're going to have a lot of your kind of producing so much outputs just with little inputs, or so much inputs you could say. So it also degrades the quality of soil as well. So you could say that in this way you need to have a lot of inputs like fertilizers, manures and machines, irrigation methods, those kind of things. So you could say that is about the intensive subsistence farming. Now that usually happens in population pressure lands, and you could say that it can be seen in most of the parts of our country as well. After that, the third type of farming that we have here is commercial farming. So commercial farming, then commercial farming we have plantations as well. Now commercial farming is usually cultivated on the land that is a very big land, and on that land you're growing a lot of crops you could say. So it is for the market purpose, for commercial purpose, because after that it will be sold into the market. It is not like you are producing that crops for your family needs and those things. So you could say that the commercial farming is generally for the commercial purpose, and we have plantations as an example. Now plantation that is done on a big land, and a single kind of crop is grown in that land. Like you have the plantation crops are known as there are many plantation crops like cashew nuts, coffee, tea, this kind of crops that are the plantational crops. So you could say that in our country there are many plantations as well, and there are some spots famous for these plantations as well. You know what, that in a plantation you need to have a lot of capital as well, because purchasing that big land, and on that land you do need to have so much labors as well, because in tea, in coffee, you need to pluck the leaves of the tea. So you could say that for doing so you need to have a lot of labor as well, and for so you need to have a lot of capital as well. And usually in plantations there are in more cases it is seen that only migrant laborers are used in plantation, are working as a plantational worker. So you could say that in plantation there's a need of lot of capital. And if we talk about some famous spots, then you know that tea that is famous in Darjeeling in West Bengal region and Assam region. After that we have coffee in Karnataka. So these are some states that these crops are grown in those states. So you could say that these are three types of farming. Like we have seen the intensive subsistence farming, after that primitive subsistence farming, and commercial farming. Now you know what, that a single crop, like for example rice, can be a commercial farming or commercial crop in West Bengal region, but it can be just a single crop or simple crop in some other region of our country. So it depends upon the region as well in what amount that crop is being grown by the farmers. So this is about the type of farming. After that we have here is cropping pattern. So cropping pattern. Now you have studied the physical diversities and plurality of our country. Like there is so much diversity in our country, and that can be seen in the patterns of agriculture as well. Like there is a cropping pattern that is followed in our country, and there are kind of so many cultures in agriculture in our country as well. So you could say that a lot of diversity can be seen in cultivation methods as well as the cropping pattern. Now in India there are mainly three cropping seasons, commonly known as Rabi, Kharif and Zaid. Now first let's discuss about the Rabi season. Now Rabi season, that is, you know that Rabi crops are mainly wheat, barley, peas, gram, these kind of crops. Now they are mainly sown from in winter seasons, you could say, like from the months of October to December, or maybe September to December or November, you could say. And after that they are harvested in summer, you could say, like from April to June. So you could say that these are crops that are sown in the winter and are harvested in the summer season, and those are known as Rabi crops or Rabi season of agriculture in our country. Now Rabi crops that can be seen mainly in the parts of northern India and northwestern India, like Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Punjab, Haryana, parts of Uttar Pradesh as well. So these are some of the states where Rabi crops can be seen. And if we talk about Rabi crops, then you could say that temperature and the cyclone season, cyclonic pressure from the western India, northwestern India is the kind of you could say that is the reason for the agriculture of these crops in those areas. So you could say that for cultivation of these crops in those areas, their temperature, their climate is suitable. After that we have Kharif season. Now Kharif season, that is, you could say that is sown. These crops are sown with the onset of monsoon, like from the month of, you could say, July, or maybe after that in August. And after that you could say that they are sown even before that. They are sown in July or even June as well. And after that they are harvested in the months of February, in January, in months of winter, you could say. So you could say that they are harvested, they are sown with the onset of monsoon, and after that harvested around the months of winter. And those, if we talk about those type of crops, like there are pulses of different kinds, so like soybean. After that we have arhar, or that we call tur. After that we have moong and urad as well. And after that there are many crops that are the kharif crops, like they are generally sown in that season. Like cotton is also a kharif crop if we talk about it. So you could say that different types of pulses and these kind of crops are the kharif crops that are sown in the kharif season pattern of our country. Now between the Rabi season and the Kharif season, there is a very short period for the Zad season, like Zad season, that is generally in summer seasons, you could say, and fruits like watermelon, muskmelon, and many types of vegetables, cucumbers are grown in that season. So you could say that there are merely the three crops. If we talk about the cropping pattern of our country, there are merely three seasons of agriculture or cropping in our country. First is Rabi season, second is the Kharif season, and third, a very short period between these two seasons, is a Zad season. So you could say that these are the cropping patterns of our country. Now let's discuss about next topic, that is major crops. So major crops, and now you know what, that there are many major crops. If you talk about major crops, like those crops, if you talk about the crops, there are many crops grown in our country, but there are some crops that are major, that like they are consumed everywhere in our country and can be exported as well. Now one thing that we left in the Kharif season was that states where Kharif crops are grown are Maharashtra. You know what, that rice is also a Kharif crop, and rice is generally grown in the coastal areas along with Uttar Pradesh. So states with Kharif season or Kharif cropping pattern are Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Odisha, West Bengal, Assam, along with Uttar Pradesh, and recently rice is also being grown in Haryana and Punjab with growing technology. So you could say that is about the Kharif crop. Now the thing that we were discussing was major crops. Now major crops, like there are so many crops in our country, but there can be some crops that are major crops, like that they are the main crops of our country that are consumed everywhere and everybody knows about them. Now let's discuss some of the major crops of our country and conditions for growing them as well. Now first one that we have here is rice. So rice, as all of you know that rice is the most stable diet of our country, and India is the second largest producer in the world of rice after China. Now China is the first and India is the second. And rice, as all of you know, that is grown like you also eat might every day and might some occasional cases as well. So you could say that rice, that is the most stable diet of our country, and India is the second largest producer of rice. Now rice needs a condition. You know what, that rice grows in those areas which has a high humidity, like there is a very high rainfall, more than 100 centimeters, and it needs a kind of hot season as well, like hot and humid climate that will be suitable for rice, and that is why it is grown in coastal areas, like that in Karnataka, Maharashtra region, Andhra Pradesh, and in those coastal regions and in deltic regions as well, like we just discussed about it. And with so many development, with so many irrigation methods, tube wells, canal systems, it has made possible for rice to be grown in regions like western Uttar Pradesh, in Punjab, in Haryana, and parts of Rajasthan as well. So you could say that in these regions as well, in these states as well, rice is grown and well in coastal areas as well. As all of you know, that is the best diet in West Bengal. So you could say that in those coastal regions and along with some northwestern states, so you could say that they are grown in those areas. So you could say that rice, that is the most stable diet of our country, is grown in those regions. And if we talk about its more condition, then what would happen, that it is a kind of Kharif crop that is grown from the regions of winter onset of monsoon, and after that it is harvested around the months of around the month of January, February. So you could say that it is a Kharif crop and is grown in the coastal regions. After that we have the next crop, that is wheat. Now wheat, you know what, that wheat, the second most stable diet of our country and the main food grain in the north and northwestern part of our country. Now wheat, that needs annual rainfall about 50 to 75 centimeters, and you could say that for wheat, if we talk about wheat, then it is used for making flour, and many of the items are made from wheat. It also acts as a raw material for many of the industries. Now states that are in which wheat is grown are Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, Haryana, in Rajasthan, in Gujarat, in those, and Bihar and Jharkhand as well. So in these states wheat is grown, and you could say that wheat, that is the main food crop of the northern and northwestern part. You could say that is why it is not grown in the southern part or the northeastern part of our country. So you could say that the wheat that is grown in our country, and it is a rabi crop, like it is harvested in kind of, you could say that in the months of summer, and after that it is like it is used in many purposes. So you could say that that is about wheat, and after that we have another crop, that is millets. Millets. Now you know what, that millets that are also known as coarse grains, and there are three major mills that are grown in India, that are 𝓥𝓲𝓫, 𝓥𝓲𝓫 and ragi. Now 𝓥𝓲, that is a rain fed up crop, like it is grown in vast areas without any use of irrigation. It usually doesn't need any kind of irrigation, and it is grown in areas like Andhra Pradesh, in Madhya Pradesh, in moist regions where there is so much moisture, you could say, without any irrigation. And if we talk about bajra, then bajra needs sandy soils and loamy soils, and it is grown in Rajasthan, in Uttar Pradesh, in Himachal Pradesh, in Uttarakhand, in some regions as well. So you could say that that is where jawar is grown. Now you know what, that if we talk about these millets, they are also very nutritional. They have their own nutritional value. Like if we talk about jawar, now many people, what they do is that whenever they have a flour, like wheat flour, they add the mixture of jawar, bajra and other millets as well, because it has a very high nutritional value with protein, calcium and other micronutrients, and as well as the roughage in that. So you could say that that is why they are also as important as other food crops. And if you talk about ragi, then ragi, that is grown in red soils, yellow soils, in black soils, in shallow black soils, in loamy soils as well. So on the basis of that, you could say that in which states they are grown. Like if it is loamy soil, it is grown in Himachal Pradesh. If it is sandy soil, it can be grown in Rajasthan and some parts of Uttar Pradesh as well. And these are the regions where this type of grown, this ragi is grown. In Maharashtra as well, in those regions you could say that where it is grown. Now one thing that we left about wheat was that there are two main regions where wheat is grown in our country. First is, you could say, 𝓥𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪 plains in our country, and second is the Deccan region. You could say that Deccan region in our country. So you could say that these two are the regions where wheat is grown in our country. Now the next major crop that we have here is maize. Now maize, that is also known as corn in many of the casual languages, and you will say that maize you have or might have already eaten, and like they have so many different cultures, different colors, different variations in maize as well. Now maize, you could say that that is grown in areas with old alluvial soil, like in regions that have old alluvial soil, maize are grown. In like regions in Uttar Pradesh, in many other regions, you could say that maize is grown, like in Bihar. And after that we have many other states, you could say that, like in southern region we have some states like you could say that Karnataka, Tamil Nadu. In those regions maize is grown, and we can see some traces of maize in Odisha region as well. So you could say that maize is grown there, and it needs a kind of old alluvial soil. And also you could say that maize that is grown in our country, it is grown in a simple variant, but in other countries, in foreign countries, it is grown in many variations. And if we talk about maize, then what happens that you could say that it needs a kind of temperature, like if you talk about maize, like it needs a kind of hot temperature, and it is kind of you could say kharif crop as well. So you could say that that is the temperature that it needs, the climate that it needs. After that, the crop that we have here is pulses. Now pulses, you know what, that India is the largest producer as well as the consumer of the pulses, and in India we have pulses like tur, that is known as arhar in common language. We have moong, urad and other pulses like gram, peas. So you could say that there are many pulses in our country, but these are the major pulses, and pulses that are the best for the vegetarian diet as they have a lot of protein, and that is why India is the largest consumer of pulses as well. And And if we talk about pulses, besides 𝓥𝓪, all the pulses, you could say that if pulses are grown on any land, then after that, after the harvesting of all the pulses, the soil regains its fertility, except 𝓥𝓪, and except tur or 𝓥𝓪 in any common language. So you could say that except that pulse, you have all other pulses that can regain the fertility of the soil, and that is why they are mainly grown in a circle, invariant, you could say in balance with other crops as well. Like, because you could say that first they are grown, other crops are grown, and when they are about to harvest, they are about to being harvested, like other pulses would be grown, sown on that region. So you could say that this is about the pulses, and you could say that pulses that are grown in Madhya Pradesh, in Punjab, in Haryana, in Uttar Pradesh, in Bihar regions. Now you might have noticed that Punjab and Haryana, like they are the states of our country that are the leading states in the way of agriculture, in the fields of agriculture. Like wheat is produced in a very, very large amount in these states. So you could say that is why we can say that if we have to, that in exams it becomes very important for you to write about the states in which this or that kind of crop is grown. So you could say that you can have a guess about it as well. Now the next topic that we have got here is food crops other than grains. So food crops other than grains. Now till now we discussed about food grains or the major crops of our country that are merely the food grains or the food crops that are being consumed or cropped, you could say, in our country. But there are still many other crops that are grown in our country that are other than the food grains, like sugarcane, cotton, and different kinds of crops, you could say. Now let's discuss about those types of crops with our subtopics. Now with the first one, that is sugarcane. So sugarcane. Now sugarcane, as all of you know, that is used to make sugar and jaggery and cancer and millets in our country. Now sugarcane, that is a tropical as well as subtropical crop in you could say that is grown in our country. Now it needs a temperature between 21 degrees Celsius to 27 degrees Celsius, and that temperature is just as the of maize. Now for maize as well, you need this temperature, and for maize too, you need to have a very good HYV variety seeds, high yielding variety seeds, you could say. So you could say that is about maize that we left that portion. Now sugarcane, that is you could say that is grown in our country and in many parts, you could say, and it takes about 1 year for sugarcane to be grown. Like from sowing to harvesting, you need a lot of care for sugarcane, and it takes about 1 year, one complete year for sugarcane to be grown. And if we talk about sugarcane, now some states in our country with massive production of sugarcane are, you could say, Uttar Pradesh, in Rajasthan, and many of the states of the country, like in Uttar Pradesh, in Rajasthan, and Madhya Pradesh. Now Uttar Pradesh, that is the leading producer in our country, you could say, and after that there are many, all you could say North Indian states, you could say, that grow the sugarcane. So sugarcane, that is an important crop in many ways. Like without sugarcane, you can't have sugar or jaggery or any kind of sweet, you could say. So you could say that is the importance of sugar that is grown in our country. It is a tropical as well as subtropical crop, and it needs a temperature between 21 degrees Celsius to 27 degrees Celsius. Now you know what, that this sugarcane that is grown, that is a kind of sad crop, like it takes for whole year to be grown, so we can't say that whether it is a rabi or kharif crop. After that, for sugarcane, you could say that in our country it needs a very well enriched soil, you could say, well treated soil, you could say, type of soil that is grown on sugarcane. After that we have another crop, that is oil seeds. So oil seeds. Now you know what, that in 2016 it was measured, it was recorded that India was second. You know that in sugarcane India was second after Brazil, and in oil seeds we were third after Canada and China. So you could say that in oil seeds for the groundnut production, precisely you could say that for groundnut production we were third after Canada and China. Now oil seeds that are lime seed, mustard seed, castor oil seeds. After that we have another like cotton seeds and groundnut as well. And if we talk about the oil seeds, they count approximately 12% of all the total cultivation area of our country. So you could say that out of the total area or agriculture in our country, on cropping cultivation in our country, 12% is on this type of oil seeds. Now some of them are edible and some of them are used directly as a raw material for many industries. Like for example, if we talk about groundnut, now groundnut that holds 50% of all the production of oil seeds in our country, like half of all the oil seed production in our country is of groundnut. And after that we have linseed and mustard in Uttar Pradesh, in Rajasthan, in Bihar, in those regions, and cotton seeds that is in the black soil area, that is the Deccan Plateau in Maharashtra, and mainly you could say. So you could say that these are some of the oil seeds that are grown in our country, in different regions of our country. After that we have another crop, that is tea. So tea, now that is the most used beverage in the world, not just in India and our country. Like tea and coffee, we always talk about them. Now tea that was initially started in our country by Britishers, by British people you could say. Now you know what happened, that tea is an example of a plantation agriculture. As all of you know that initially it was started by British, and now all the plantation, most of the plantation of tea is owned by Indians, and that is why we can say that in our country there is a lot of production of tea as well. Like they are known for their fine quality as well as a large production, massive production in our country, as there is a lot of consumption of tea in our country as well. Now tea that is produced in darjeeling, in many of the, you could say that in Darjeeling, in West Bengal region, in Assam regions, in those regions, in Meghalaya as well, and apart from that it is grown in Uttarakhand regions as well. So you could say that these are the states where tea is grown. And if we talk about tea, China, you could say India was the second producer, largest producer after China in the whole world in 2016 recordings. So you could say that is tea that is grown in our country. And for tea, what you need is that frost-free days for a whole year, and after that a heavy rainfall. Like you could say that showering, not just rainfall, there is a need of showering. You know what, if there is rainfall, then it would harm the tender leaves of the tea, and that is why there is a need of showering of rain, you could say, in the whole processing. So you could say that for tender leaves to be soft and tender, for tea leaves there is a need of showering of water as well. And for plucking the tea leaves you need to have a lot of skilled labor so as to not to harm the tender leaves. So you could say that is why tea in the plantation work, plantation agriculture, a lot of labor is needed, a lot of capital, and frost-free days for the whole year. After that we have another crop, that is coffee. Now that is also a beverage, and you could say that India is known for the finest quality, the best good quality of coffee in the world. Now in India, Arabica type of coffee is grown that was initially brought up in India by Yemen, or you could say by Yemen people. So you could say that it was initially started from Yemen in our country, and after that it became a big like this. Now it was started in Baba Budan Hills, and even today it is confined to the Nilgiri mountains of Karnataka, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu. Now these are the three states where coffee is grown, and you could say for a good quality as well. And for coffee is also plantation agriculture, plantational crop. Plantation crop is always, you know, that a single crop is grown for commercial purpose, a lot of capital is needed. So you could say that coffee too is a plantation crop, and it is confined to the Nilgiri mountains of Karnataka, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu. After that we have the crops, that is horticulture crops. So horticulture crops. Now you know what horticulture crops did for this. Also India accounted the second position after China, and for coffee as well. So you could say that after China we were the second in almost everything, so like for fruits and vegetables. Horticulture is also known as the cultivation of fruits and vegetables. Like in India there are a lot of fruits and vegetables that are grown. Like if we talk about vegetables, like almost in all states, like different types of vegetables are grown. Cabbage, cauliflowers, onions, tomatoes, and potatoes, the most important in our country. After that we have fruits for some specific regions, like mangoes of Uttar Pradesh, of Karnataka, of Maharashtra. After that apricots and apples of Himachal Pradesh, and most importantly Jammu and Kashmir. Pineapple apples in Meghalaya, and yeah, the oranges in Nagpur, and in some parts of Meghalaya as well. So you could say that there are some specific fruits in specific regions of our country according to their climates, like grapes that are grown in Maharashtra and even in that specifically Nasik region. So you could say that there are a lot of fruits that are grown specifically in different regions of the country, and they have their own specialty. Haven't you seen fruits and vegetables in your markets, grocery shops as well? So you could say that India is a very big big producer of all the fruits and vegetables, horticulture that we call. So you could say that many fruits and vegetables are also grown in our country. And as all of you know that there can be some rabi crops as well as some kharif crops, like there are mangoes that we eat in summer, but after that we eat pineapples or maybe another fruits in winter season, like apples in winter season. So you could say that there are some different seasons for all the type of fruits and vegetables as well. Now next topic that we have got here is non-food crops. So non-food crops. Now till now we discussed about the food grains and the food crops, but there are still some crops other than food crops. So let's discuss about those food crops one by one with subtopics. Now the first crop is rubber. So rubber, now that acts as a raw material for industries, and you could say that it is an equatorial crop but can be grown in tropical and subtropical regions with many of the conditions and methods, like with irrigation methods and many other technologies. After that, it is grown in our country as well, and for growing rubber you need to have a lot of rainfall, more than above 200 centimeters, annual rainfall above 200 centimeters, and you need to have a humid climate as well. So humid climate, like you could say that, and temperature above 25 degrees Celsius. So kind of hot and humid climate for rubber. Now in India, rubber is grown in states like Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and in Garo Hills of Meghalaya region. So you could say that these are the regions where rubber is grown in our country, and in a large, not in so much large amount, but yeah, it is grown in our country. After that, we have another crop that is fiber crops. Fiber crops. Now there are 4 natural fiber crops that are cotton, jute, hemp, and natural silk that can be called as, you could say that, as fiber crops. Like from those we make fabric, and after that your clothes are made. But you know what are the former 3? The first 3 are obtained from soil, are produced from soil. But the later one, the last one, that is the natural, you could say that nature silk, you could say natural silk, is obtained from the cocoon that are known as silkworms, and they are fed on the mulberry leaves, and after that you could say that by a process there is a kind of cultivation of those silkworms that is known as sericulture. Now what happens in this process, that they are kind of, first they are taken, they are kind of cultivated, they are, you could say that they are petted in the homes, they are domesticated in the homes of farmers, they are taken, kept, and after that they are fed on the mulberry leaves, and after some time they become very fat because they have a kind of layers of silks around them, and in a hot water they are poured and they die but still come up. So you could say that in that hot water the silkworm dies, the cocoon dies, that later becomes silkworm, but the silk on the top of that was stuck on that silkworm would come up in that water, and this is also cultivation of that creature, we could say, and that is known as sericulture, like the process of obtaining the silk from the silkworms or the cocoons fed on mulberry leaves. So you could say that is about the fiber crops. Now the next crop that we have here is cotton. Now cotton, as all of you know that there is so much conditions for growing cotton as well. Like it needs 210 days frost free. Like it does not need like all the days without frost, but yeah, 210 days frost free days. After that it needs bright sunshine for growth, and it needs black soil to grow as well. So there are a lot of conditions for cotton as well, and it needs a rainfall as well, a kind of heavy heavy to moderate rainfall for growing as well, and it is generally grown in areas like in Deccan Plateau, in Maharashtra, in Gujarat, and in other states. Like you could say that there are many other states, but mainly they are grown in Maharashtra and Gujarat. Apart from that, we have some in Karnataka, in Bihar, in those regions. So you could say that cotton is grown in those areas, and cotton, that is the most important for the cotton textile. Now India is believed to be the home of cotton production. It's also known that even Britishers came in our country for the cotton, that was their main purpose for the industries, you could say. So you could say that cotton that is grown in our country, and it is a very important material, raw material in cotton textile as well. Now next one, last crop that here we have is jute. Now jute, that is also known as golden fiber. Now we use jute for making gunny bags, ropes, and many kind of bags, ropes, mats, different kind of things that we don't wear but use it in our daily lives. And jute, if we talk about jute, it means a very humid climate, hot climate, and a rainfall region as well. So it is grown in West Bengal, in those regions, like in West Bengal, in Telangana, in Andhra Pradesh, in southern part of the country. So that is about jute. Now we discuss about the non-food groups. Now non-food crops that we discussed were rubber that is grown in mainly Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and in Andaman and Nicobar Islands as well. After that, we discussed about the fiber crops. After that, cotton and the jute, that is also known as the golden fiber. Now after that, we have the topic that is technological and institutional reforms. So technological and institutional reforms. Now as all of you already know that you have studied about agriculture, that you would know that in India agriculture has been practiced for many years, for thousands of years, and a lot of land for agriculture is being used. Sustained uses of land is there without any compatibility with socio-technological issues, like not with techniques and technology, and that social technologies that have been introduced. And that is why, as all of you know that in India there are more than 60% of people who are dependent on agriculture, and that is why we need to have some reforms in agriculture as well, like some technological and institutional reforms in agriculture. As it was said, it was declared, like it was demanded by many agriculturalists, many environmentalists, and many people for a country, like who wanted to change the country, and thus there is a need of consolidation of lands, collectivization, cooperation, and abolition of zamindari, etc. And we can see some examples in our country as well for reforms in agriculture. Like a very good example would be Green Revolution. Now it was only because of Green Revolution that in Punjab, in regions like Punjab and Haryana, you can grow these many crops. So you could say that those crops can be grown in particular regions because of the Green Revolution. But yeah, Green Revolution and White Revolution that was known as Operation Flood. But now they were also in some selected areas. It is not that in all the areas they were introduced, they were started, and that is why we need to do these kind of revolutions in all the areas, like in remote areas, in backward areas, in rural areas, in urban areas as well. So in all the areas equally in our country. After that, if we talk about reforms, then there is an example of Bhudan or Gramdan as well. Now Bhudan and Gramdan, what happened that Vinoba Bhave. Now Vinoba Bhave was a kind of whom Mahatma Gandhi very admired, you could say, very praised as well. And after Mahatma Gandhi's death, you could say after his death, he followed his path. And after that, that when he was giving a lecture in Andhra Pradesh in a village, now there were many landless owners, you could say the landless farmers, who came to him asking or demanding for some land for agriculture. Well, he did not promise them, but yeah, he did say that he would say he would demand for it in the government, in the council, in the house assemblies, and that's when 80 acres of land was distributed among 80 landless farmers. Now bhudan, that is dan, that like means dan kind of charity or a kind of, you could say, donation, and bhu, that is related with bhumi, that means land, so kind of land donation. And after that there were many thoughtful people who came up, and there was a scene of gram dan as well. Dan here again means donation, and gram means villages. Now what happened, that the villages were being distributed, like a single village land was being given to many landless farmers. So you could say that now many landless owners were now were having lands, and now could have agriculture cultivation on that land as well. So it is also a very good example for agricultural reforms in our country, and the credit goes to Vinoba Bhave. Now this revolution, kind of revolution, is also known as bloodless revolution in our country. Now if we talk about the agricultural reforms in our country, there are still many other reforms, like you know what, that in our country many acts have been passed, many bills have been passed, and so on so far. We have a lot of acts and for preserving the land using this or that. In our country there is a system of irrigation, many technologies, but still many farmers are still dependent on monsoon and natural fertility, and this is a very serious issue. Like people just neglect the fact, but again it will become a very serious issue if this continues in the future as well. So we have to think about it as well. Now the next topic that we have here is contribution of agriculture to the national economy, employment and output. So the contribution of the agriculture to the national economy, employment and output. Output like the produce of the agriculture. As all of you know that gross product, you could say gross domestic product, like GDP of our country, there should be a contribution of agriculture on it as well. And there is, but it has been declining over years, and it has to be increased as well. Because if agricultural GDP decreases, then there would be effect in other areas as well, like in other spheres as well. So that is why we need to have more and more GDP of agricultural sector as well. Now you know what is happening in our country, that 52% of all the workforce has been employed in agricultural sector. That is more than half of the population of our country, and that is why we must say that there is a need for agricultural reforms, like you could say that more and more reforms in our country, and more GDP contribution of agriculture in the whole budget, you could say, in GDP, and it is for the employment of people as well. But now what is happening, that decline of subsidy, like subsidy as all of you know that is provided by the government. So declining of subsidy is leading towards the agricultural loss. Now there are less farmers who are investing in agriculture, you could say less people who are investing in agriculture, and that is why for good output, for good employment and for good GDP, we need to have more and more agricultural reforms. Like what happened that between, you could say that between 1960 and between 1970 we had a lot of a kind of focus or a kind of lot of attention to the agricultural reforms, like the green revolution and white revolution, but again it was just in selected areas. And even the first year plan of our country, first 5-year plan, was also based on land reforms, land conservation, you could say. And that is why we could say that for GDP, that all of you know that gross domesticated value, like the gross domesticated product, you could say, like that is a value on an average. So you could say that is for the GDP, for the employment and for the kind of all that output of agriculture. We need to have reforms in agriculture as well. And after that there is a kind of less investment of farmers in agriculture and less potential as well, and that is why we need to increase that, like import. If in India there is a lot of competition among the people as well to the international producers, so that is why there should be less import in our country. That our agriculture fields should be encouraged, you could say, and a lot of crops should be grown in our country. Now next and last topic of this chapter is impact of globalization on agriculture. So impact of globalization on agriculture. Now globalization, that is not just a new phenomena. You already know that from a long history we can still have the traces of globalization. Like for example, from the British period, we can say that the cotton from our country was being exported to British cotton textile industries, mills, cotton mills. Like if Manchester area and Liverpool area of Britain became very famous, became very developing area, then it was because of the raw supply of cotton, of very good quality cotton from our country. And after that, many of the spices from our country were being exported to South Africa as well, and still today they are. So you could say that globalization, that can be a very good factor, but yeah, a lot of globalization will affect everything. Now what happened that in history when cotton was being exported, and in spite of being a very good producer of jute, rubber, cotton, silk and other materials, crops in our country, still farmers today face a very big competition to international producers in the international market, and that is because of the effect of globalization, and that we need to decrease the effects of that globalization. Now there should be more focus on right to inheritance, like consolidation of the lands. Like it should be that you could say that green revolution. In green revolution, a lot of pesticides. You could say that if there are reforms, then there can be some questions on it as well. Like for green revolution, we have some issues like they have led to land degradation, as it will be a lot of HIV variety seeds and chemical fertilizers, pesticides, insecticides would be used that will lead to land degradation. So we need to have a kind of technological reform in agricultural sector, and after that there should be a use of irrigation as well, lack of chemical fertilizers, but more an organic factor, organic farming. You know what, in organic farming there will be less use of fertilizers, chemical fertilizers, and less use of biochemicals in agriculture, and there would be good produce as well. After that, second method could be for agricultural reform, that in India not all the cereals should be produced, but high value crops should be produced, like 𝓥𝓲𝓫𝓱𝓪𝓷. Like for example, very developed countries like Israel and China, any other countries, what they do is that they export their farm products, like just as we said, that high crop value seeds, high value crops, you could say, that were grown in their farms, in their agriculture sector, and they import the cereals from other countries, so that they have become developed in that way as well. So we could say that we have to take that risk as well. So you could say that you have to debate about it with your classmates, and you can think about it, because if we are producing more and more high value crop, then what would happen, that it will not lead to unproductivity of soil that easily, and we can have cereals imported from other countries as well, and overall it will lead to benefit to us as well. So you could say that is about the effect of globalization on agriculture, as it has a lot of effect on agriculture. So that is all we have discussed in this chapter. Now firstly, we discussed about the types of farming, like intensive subsistence farming, primitive subsistence farming, and after that commercial farming. Major crops we did discuss about, in which we discussed about pulses, rice, wheat, and in maize we discussed a little bit less you could say compared to others. Now maize, that needs from 21 degrees Celsius to 27 degrees Celsius, and it needs a very high variety kind of seed, that is HYV variety seeds, otherwise it would be very hard for it to be grown, and it is a kind of grown in our country. After that we discussed about non-food crops, and you could say that other kind of crops like non-food grain crops, sugarcane, rubber, cotton, fiber crops we discussed about. And after that we discussed about the problems on agriculture, that there should be reforms in agricultural sector for making our country more developed. So for you, as I also know that agriculture, many people are dependent on agriculture, whether for commercial purpose or for their family needs, and that is why we need to have reforms in agricultural fields. So that's all we have discussed in this chapter. I've discussed all topics and subtopics, and the next chapters of this book will be covered in further upcoming videos. So stay tuned for upcoming videos. Thank you very much.